minutes. Around 4 years ago I read an article written by Carlton Reid suggesting that companies who make money from cycling should throw their weight behind cycle campaigning. As with pretty much everything in the world of campaigning, it hasn't happened. We are still around about the 2% mark for the share of journeys that are cycled in the UK every day, compared to around about a third in the Netherlands. The areas in the UK that are leading, such as Cambridge, Oxford, Waltham Forest and Hackney, along with other cities that are taking a different tack, for example Nottingham, are making considerable changes with the introduction of the workplace parking levee in Nottingham. So even though there's a considerable a number of cities and areas that are making serious changes, cycling is still a minority mode of transport. We know that every aspect of life is improved by safer cycling. Local economies improve. The benefit to cost ratio of safe cycling infrastructure is up to 10 times higher than the same ratio for building roads. People who cycle are physically and mentally healthier, which makes them more productive. In turn, this reduces the strain on our overburdened NHS. This is a triple positive, that's what that's known as. Creating choices that don't include driving for commutes reduces pollution and therefore disease that is brought on by illegal air quality, also diminishing the need for NHS interventions. All this information we've known for years, yet we don't do anything about it. We know the Dutch have been changing their entire country to favour modes of transport that are kinder on society. They've been doing so since the 70s. Seville and Pontevedra have been racing ahead in the past decade or so, removing motor traffic and creating safe space for cycling. It doesn't take long to redesign urban areas at all, and we haven't got time. We haven't got very long at all. We have very little time to stop the climate and ecological emergency from engulfing our civilization. The speed of environmental breakdown is accelerating as we pass numerous tipping points. We have very little knowledge of when these feedback loops will become so severe that they will start a one-way journey to an inhospitable planet. Transport is the largest emitting CO2 sector in the UK and has been since 2014-2015. And to paraphrase Chris Boardman, we are swimming in evidence that safer cycling will have a fantastic effect on every part of society, yet we carry on worshipping our motor vehicles, knowing that our continued use of them is stealing the future from our children and increasingly from ourselves. Last year in the UK, the amount of people cycling on the roads dropped. Our house is on fire. We have a duty to the following generations to salvage what we can, yet we seem incapable of making the changes we know will help us transition from a carbon-intensive transport system to a carbon-free transport system. Electric vehicles are not the answer. They cost an incredible amount of carbon to emissions to create each one, more than a fossil fuel-powered vehicle. Public transport and cycling are the answer to the overwhelming majority of national journeys. I really think that point is key. Time and time again you see politicians standing there and saying we are dealing with a climate and ecological crisis, we are pumping loads of money into making electric vehicles, and they just are not the answer. They are part of the problem, they are not part of the solution. So Stop Killing Cyclists have joined forces with Extinction Rebellion for this national cycling protest. Extinction Rebellion Haringey have been particularly helpful. They are arranging a swarming protest at Turnpike Lane in North London tomorrow at 4:30 for 1 hour, and they'll appreciate any help from anybody here that feels they can go along and attend. The Stop Killing Cyclist protests, the Stop Killing Cyclist demands, have been brought sharply into focus. Our new Prime Minister, who said that his biggest success whilst he was the London Mayor was starting the cycle superhighway network, has decided to appeal to the motorist vote by cutting fuel duty. This year, the government spent £121 million on safer cycling. The widening of one road in the southwest has a budget of £2 billion. The reality is we need £6 billion to be spent on safe cycling, in line with the UN suggestion of 20% of the transport budget. This is Stop Killing Cyclists' first demand. It's billions, not millions, that will ensure that fewer car journeys are made and more miles are cycled. Fuel duty has been frozen in the last 8 years, which has kept tens of billions of tax from the Treasury. A Prime Minister of the government A Prime Minister of a government that has declared a climate emergency, who then cuts fuel duty, is a Prime Minister who is shockingly out of touch with the severity of our situation. Stop killing cyclists' second demand is to stop the freeze or cuts on fuel duty immediately. The government needs to incentivise cycling and public transport and disincentivise motor transport concurrently. The third demand is to make villages, towns and city centres car-free. Growing up in Dartmoor in the 70s, I was able to cycle around the village and walk to school on my own, to primary school, from the age of 5 onwards. I could do this because it was safe. It was safe because there was no traffic in those days. We didn't have any particularly specific cycling infrastructure. We didn't need it. There was hardly any cars on the road. And consequently, it was safe. I started campaigning after reading Carlton Reid's article, and I then realised that my daughter couldn't travel to her primary school in Tower Hamlets on her own because the road she had to cross was far too dangerous. 2 families were hit by drivers on separate occasions whilst walking on the pavements to her school. I campaigned for the council to widen the pavement and make the road one way, which has made the children's walk to school far safer than it has been for a very, very long time. It isn't just everybody in the cycling industry that should be supporting these demands. It isn't just everyone here that should be supporting safer cycling. It's everyone who wants a habitable future for themselves, for their children, and for our grandchildren. Thank you very much. Okay, so that was the introduction. Shortly, Max will read the Seamus Heaney poem, The Summer of Lost Rachel, which he wrote as a tribute to his niece who was killed by a driver. Following that, we're going to have some other speakers, some medics, some cycling campaigners from around the country,